listening to Arin It Out, a podcast that inspires everyday people to lead with purpose in their careers, communities, and callings. I'm Arin Patterson, TEDx speaker, leadership strategist, and culture architect. I'm passionate about helping people discover their strengths, develop their skills, and do meaningful and fulfilling work. Through honest conversations and real reflections, we'll explore what it truly takes to lead well, not just in the work that you do, but in who you become. Because it's not about the title you wear, it's about the stretch, the setbacks, and the silent wins along the way. Are you ready to grow, lead, and leave your mark? If so, let's begin. Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Arin It Out, the podcast where we talk leadership, lessons, and life. I'm your host, Arin Patterson, and I'm so glad you're here. Now today's episode 3 of season 2, is entitled The Comparison Trap. We're talking about comparison, one of the biggest thieves of joy, confidence, and contentment. If you've ever felt behind in your career, questioned your relationships, or wondered why someone else's life seemed to be moving faster than yours, this episode is for you. Now, before we jump into today's topic, I want to acknowledge the elephant in the room. Now, if you've been listening to me for any length of time, you've probably noticed that during this season, I have not been releasing episodes as frequently as I typically do. Now, I have spent a lot of time reflecting this summer. There's 2 reasons why I haven't been posting as much as I typically do. I think the first is because for the first time in a long time, I'm able to really get into this place of rest. I want to say like a rhythm of rest, with how busy work has been, with just finishing my master's. I have just been enjoying the process of having fewer responsibilities and not feeling like I need to fill that time. As much as important as this podcast is to me, I don't think that this podcast can become what I desire for it to become if I don't find myself in this place of resetting. And so I've been taking this summer to really kind of relax, really rest, and really kind of reimagine what I want a lot of things in my life, in my career to look like. And part of that is not reconsidering this podcast, because this podcast, I believe, is something I'm supposed to be doing, but just making sure that I'm going about it in the right way. So that's one of the reasons. I think the other reason is because this season, I've really been talking about some heavy topics, some important topics. And before I can just come here and share all these things with you that are important and meaningful, I've got to sit with them myself. So the very first episode of this season, talking about growth and how it doesn't happen overnight, I've really had to sit with that and what that looks like for my life. And then the next episode, we talked about look again. And then today we're talking about comparison. So all of these things are not something I typically just get up and talk to in front of a crowd about. These are things that I'm having to actually ask myself, what do these things mean for the reality of my life? And what does it look like for me to live these truths in my everyday life? So there's been a bit of me just really sitting with these ideas and not allowing myself to feel like I need to rush forward in them. Today's episode is one that is not only deeply personal, but something that I have really been maybe processing through in some levels for my own self. And I want to let you guys know that I think about this podcast and I think about the people who are listening, and I think about the things that I want to share with you all. But it's just as important as it is for me to share this with you all. It's important for me to be in a place where I can share it from a place of this is something that I am actively doing and pursuing and living in my own life, not just something that I'm talking about. So that's a little bit of a background of why it's taking so long. I have heard many of people reach out and say, Arin, where is the next episode? You guys, I'm here today. And just know that I am constantly creating and thinking through, and I just wanted to take a little bit extra time this summer. And it really wasn't something I planned up front, but It was something that I said, Arin, don't feel like you need to go 100 miles per hour. Like, enjoy the summer, enjoy the season of rest. And I'm getting to that point where I'm getting ready to gear back up. So, thank you all for being patient with me. Thank you all for listening. And that's enough of that. Let's get into what today's topic is. I think comparison is one of the easiest traps to fall into because there's a bit of naturalness with it, right? If you're looking at jobs, you may be comparing this one job in this one location to this other job in another location. Or even with the same, in the same vein, if you're looking at jobs, you may be looking at the salaries between the two and say, does it make sense for me to make this much salary doing this work or make this much salary doing this other body of work? Or even, relationships. A lot of times we think about someone that we previously were with versus someone that we're talking to now, and what are the pros and cons? What are the differences between these individuals? Or if you're looking for a home or for an apartment, it's natural to say, this one apartment has these really cool and amazing things, and this other apartment, not so much. But what I've come to realize is that your journey is your journey. The moment you start using someone else's life as the measuring stick for your own, you've already started asking the wrong question. So I want to give you 3 reasons why comparison is so dangerous. Here's the first big idea. Comparison robs you of the joy in your journey. Comparison robs you of the joy in your journey. Now, comparison has a way of making an incredible blessing in your life feel ordinary. You may be working a job and you finally get a promotion that you've been wanting. And from before you started, you're like, okay, my next goal is to get this position. And you finally hear, I've been promoted to this next opportunity. And then you start to feel some type of way when you find out someone else became a director. They got a promotion that seemingly is a higher step up than what you received. And you begin to wonder, what's different about them from me? You move to a new city, you get a really cute, amazing apartment, you've got a beautiful view of the city, and then you find out your friend from back home just bought a house. And this really nice apartment that fits the stage and place in life that you're at right now, you're beginning to compare this friend's home to what you have right now. Or how about this? You finish grad school like me, and you find out someone else who's the same age as you didn't just finish grad school. They just finished their doctorate. They just received a higher level of degree than you received. And you begin to compare your journey to theirs. Now, nothing has changed about your accomplishment, about you getting the promotion, about you locking in that dream apartment that you've been looking at, about you finishing graduate school. Nothing changed about the joy and the excitement that you had about those things. The only thing that changed is your perspective about them. There's a concept in psychology known as social comparison theory. And it basically says that people naturally evaluate themselves by comparing themselves to others. Sometimes we compare upward to people that we think are ahead of us, to our boss, to leaders in our organization, to people who may be a few years ahead of us or a few stages in life ahead of us. The problem is that upward comparison often leaves us feeling like our own progress isn't enough. Or how about this? Sometimes we compare ourselves to people that we deem as below us. And instead of being able to celebrate our journey and celebrate their journey as independent, we kind of get a sense of pride of like, I'm so glad I'm not where they are. And neither are beneficial. Comparing yourself upward or comparing yourself downward. Because at the end of the day, your journey is your journey. And instead of asking the question, am I growing? Am I getting better? Am I developing? When we compare ourselves to others, we're really asking, am I growing as fast as them? Am I developing as fast as them? Am I becoming as good as they are? And I just want you to ask yourself, when is the last time that comparison stole your ability to celebrate something good in your own life? When did comparison steal your ability to celebrate something good in your own life? Now, here's a second big idea. Comparison puts other people at the center of your life. Comparison puts other people at the center of your life. When we compare ourselves to another person, it's almost like we are saying, here's the pen. I want you to write out what is deemed as good, acceptable, and appropriate for my life, instead of you having the pen in your own hand and saying, here are the things that I deem as good, right, and acceptable for my life. Instead of living according to your values, your goals, your own purpose, you begin reacting to everyone else's milestones, and your timeline becomes their timeline. But like I said before, your journey is your journey and no one else's. So stop comparing your definition of success to their definition. Stop comparing what you are doing to what they are doing. Because when you do that, your joy then becomes dependent on what they're doing. If they succeed and go a step ahead of you, you find yourself dissatisfied. But on the other hand, if they do not get the job, do not get the promotion, do not get the opportunity, you find joy in their quote unquote lack of success. What a life to live. I'm a very observant person. But one thing that I can say that I don't do at this point in my life, or don't do often, I should say. I don't want to say I never do this. It's very rare that I look at someone else's life and say, man, I wish I had that life. I'm grateful for the life that I live, and I'm grateful for the things that I have been accomplishing. But I'm very mindful to say that, again, this is my journey. And I can't remember, I think I mentioned this on a previous podcast, or, I can't say for sure, but I have a friend that we went to high school together. We went to middle school together. We no longer live in the same place, but every now and again we have a chance to catch up, and, we have a good time. And our lives have looked completely different. From the moment that we finished high school to where we are today, our lives don't look the same. Other than the fact that we both went to college and graduated. I think that's probably the only true similarity that we have. But this friend of mine, she got married not too long after college. Not too long after getting married, had her first child. And today she has 4 children. And that's not my story. And I could easily compare my life to her life, my journey to her journey. But one thing that I understand, and I think it's been easy for me to understand in this specific situation, is yes, those are all the beautiful and really amazing things happening in her life. But you never truly know the things that a person goes through. And I'm not saying that this is true for her specifically, but I'm saying this in general. You never know the things that a person goes through to get those things that they say they want. And for you to compare what someone else has when you don't understand what they did to go about to acquire those things, I think it's unwise. It is unwise for us to look at someone's life and be jealous of them or compare ourselves to them when we don't understand the story behind how they got to where they are. And one thing that I believe is true is you should be able to look at other people's lives and be inspired by it. There shouldn't be this like comparison of, man, I wish I had this, or, all the, here's where I am, here's the education that I had. I should have been able to get this position. I don't know how their background got them this position. Like, we've got to stop all of that. What I want you to do is be able to be inspired by someone else's journey. And if there's something beautiful, if there's something cool, if there's something amazing that you see in what they have been doing, take that. Take that as inspiration for yourself. But do not find yourself in a position where you are literally trying to calculate how they got to where they are and trying to say, if I do these exact same steps, I'll get exactly what they have, because that's just not how life works. And here's the third big idea. Comparison ignores the differences and nuances of our lives. And this is the part we almost always forget. We compare outcomes without comparing context. Oh, that's so good. We compare outcomes without comparing context. You don't know what that person who got that position sacrificed. You don't know what opportunities that they had and took advantage of 5 years ago, 10 years ago. You don't know who mentored them, what information that they got that maybe you haven't received. You don't know what struggles they're carrying. So yes, maybe they're in that role, but you don't know that they just lost one of the most important people in their lives. You don't know how long they've waited for that. You may know how old they are, but you don't know what dreams they had as a child, what things they said that they would do. And you don't know that it's actually taken them 20 years from the day they decided this is what they wanted for them to actually get that thing. You don't know what they've been hoping for, believing for. You have no idea. You have no idea. And yes, there's people like me who share our stories on platforms like, for me, like it's this podcast. Some people it's, they share their lives on Instagram, or they share YouTube videos or whatever it is, TikTok. But you truly don't always know the specific things behind their story and how they got to where they are today. Everyone's life has variables that you can't see and you can't account for. So why in the world would you compare your story with their story when you've only been present for one chapter of their story? You find yourself entering their life in chapter 17. You have no idea what happened in chapters 1 through 16. You have no idea. And this kind of reminds me of something that we talked about in the last episode entitled Look Again, that we need to incorporate new information. The truth is we rarely have enough information to make a fair comparison in the first place. Forget the fact that we shouldn't even be comparing, because that's not beneficial to us and to our story and to our journey. But many times we don't even have enough information to make an accurate comparison at all. Comparison, it doesn't just distract you. What it really does, it redirects you, and not necessarily in a good way. Comparison sometimes causes you to shift your focus away from the person that you are becoming and towards the person that someone else appears to be. I can say one thing that I'm grateful for, I've had many jobs, I've switched industries, and I've never stayed in a place long enough from a career perspective to I've never stayed in a place long enough to be too focused on what someone else is doing, because I've been like, I've arrived here, I've got to get good at what I'm doing. And then by the time I feel like I'm good, I'm in a place of I'm ready for the next thing. I've got to focus on the next thing that's coming. And that's what our mindsets and our perspective should be. Again, take what is good from people. Take what is inspirational. Ask questions. Be okay asking questions, but don't feel like where they are is where you are supposed to be. Remember, your journey is your journey. Your timing is your timing. Your purpose is your purpose. And the goal is and never was to become someone else. The goal is and always will be to be faithful to who you are becoming. I'm sure you've heard it said in this way: stay in your lane. Stay in your lane as you are driving on the highway. I've been there before where people swerving, they're texting or whatever, and they're swerving into your lane. Don't be that person. Be the person who recognizes what is in front of them for their own life. You've got dreams, you've got goals. What does it take for you to pursue those things? And also be okay asking, are these dreams and goals the ones I have for myself, or are these dreams and goals I have because of what I've seen other people doing? Stay in your lane, look forward, and also reassess. Reassess those dreams, reassess those goals, because you living in someone else's lane is not going to get you to the destination that you're supposed to be at. In the coming days and weeks, and even the coming months, we're past the midpoint of the year. We're not quite towards the end of the year, but we're in a good place for reflection. And I want you to pay close attention to the moments in your life when comparison creeps in. The moments where you overly ask about a person's qualifications, overly ask about a person's ability, overly wonder, why did this person get this job? Why didn't I get that job? Why didn't I get a call back for this job? That should have been my job. I want you to be mindful of those moments. And I want you to ask yourself, am I judging the situation based on who I am and who I am becoming? Or am I using someone else's life as the scorecard for my own? And then, as you're thinking through that, I want you to ask yourself this question: what does it look like for me to celebrate my own progress? What are the things in my own life that I can celebrate that do not require me to compare myself to someone else? And typically, I don't like to say too much after the reflection, but I do want to say this. This year has been a beautiful year for me. It hasn't been a perfect year, but there's been a lot of learning. There's been a lot of growth. There's been a lot of just realizations for myself. And, I try to go into every year, every season, every stage in my life with like an open mind and an open heart. I have my dreams, I have my goals, but I do not hold on too tightly to some of them. And so, I finished my master's, the coursework, back in June. All of the requirements are done. And I have graduation coming up in August. And there's been this big gap between. And I found myself like not super excited to celebrate graduation. And I think it's just because there's been so much time that has passed that I'm like, I'm just ready to go on to the next thing. But even in preparing this episode, I was reminded, Arin, you are someone who celebrates even the small things. And so I'm having to like get myself excited to celebrate graduation. I have family coming into town, friends coming into town. I'll probably do like a dinner or something. But I have to be reminded, like, this is something that I was working on for myself, that I've been planning for myself. And this is a milestone in my own journey. There's many cool and amazing things that are coming up, and even something that I would like to share here on the podcast, but I realize there's a few phone calls I need to make before I can announce that. But where are opportunities in your life to celebrate things? And they don't have to be as monumentous as finishing grad school, but it could be something like, I've been applying for jobs and I finally found the direction that I'm going in, and, plan a party before you get to the interview. Plan an opportunity to sit down and celebrate before these things are happening. And I think that you'll find that your attitude begins to shift. And when you shift from, I should have this because someone else has this, to I should have this because this is the direction that I believe my life is going, I think you'll find yourself in a place of better success. If today's episode resonated with you, here's how you can help keep the conversation going. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new episodes. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure you follow the show and leave a rating or a review. It helps more people find these conversations. Share this episode with a friend or a colleague who needs the reminder that their journey is their journey and that comparison isn't the measure of progress. And finally, connect with me on LinkedIn or send me an email at hello@arinpatterson.com. I'd love to hear about a career or leadership success or even a challenge that you're currently working through. Next time on Arin It Out, we're shifting from mindset to momentum. We're going to talk about motivation, not the kind that's based on hype or inspiration, but the kind that helps you keep showing up long after the excitement wears off. Because if growth takes time and comparison can distract us from the journey, then the next question becomes, how do we keep going when we don't feel like it? Thanks again for joining me for another episode of Arin It Out. I'm so glad you were here. I can't wait to see you next time.